Here on Dave's Gone By, this is quite honestly a face and a voice from my past. And when I say my past, I'm talking about 40 to 45 years ago, back when I was in high school, lovely George W. Hewlett High School on Long Island. This was a fella that was matriculating along with me, but I guess I didn't have a sense of you until I got involved in theater, which was fairly late in my high school path. And I mean, I guess I can tell the story, or we'll both tell the story of you were not an actor, but you were learning at that point already to be a director, right? So
Right.
the first show that I ever tried out for, I had taken one or two classes in theater in high school. And I saw, you know what, I got the bug, I got bit. So let me try out for whatever the school play is. I knew I wasn't going to do a musical, but you guys were doing Come Blow Your Horn, Neil Simon's first hit. I mean, people have kind of forgotten that one, but it was a big hit before Star Spangled Girl and Odd
Hmm.
Couple and all those others.
Yes.
And I tried out, and I remember the audition. Do you remember the auditions for Come Blow Your Horn in high school, Randy Packer?
I really don't. I
Oh,
really don't. It was a long time ago. It was the first show I ever directed, and I've done a lot since then. So
yeah.
no, I don't.
Well, then I'll refresh your memory, since this is kind of a dialogue. I just remember the plot of Come Blow Your Horn is this kind of blowhard dad and his Jewish wife, and then they've got two sons, and one son is kind of brash and know-it-all and going to be successful and good with girls, and the other's really sort of nervous and
Right.
nerdy, and the older brother's taking him under his wing. So I was going to try out, and I said, oh my God, I'm perfect for that younger, nerdy, nervous, neurotic brother. And I went in and said, okay, if I'm going to nail anything, I'm going to nail this. And I went in there and tried to do my best. And then one of the games you had us do, I don't even know if you remember this, was to do like a cartoon character from Warner Brothers. And you had me do, or maybe I chose to do Yosemite Sam. You probably made
Hmm.
me do Yosemite Sam. And I just sort of squatted down on both knees with my fingers like this, like, "Arr, you rascal, whatever. And went out of there and just was like, I have no idea what the hell I was just doing. And then like 2 days later, I look on the call board and you would cast me, but not as the nerdy son. You cast me, and this is so prescient, as sort of the angry, blustering, blowhard, always oppressed father figure. And I think I did pretty well. I got some laughs, but do you now remember any of that?
I don't remember the audition process. I really honestly only have vague memories of this show. It was senior year, right? So that would have been 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I know I shouldn't say that. It's
1981. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So a lot has happened since then. I have vague memories of the production. I seem to recall that the production went well. It was well received. But it was a long time ago.
No, the one thing I remember besides like the laughter and the audiences, I think we did two performances. And I remember, first of all, you rehearsed us to a fairly well. We were in rehearsal for about 2 months on this, like 4 or 5 days a week for 2 hours after school. And we
Right.
just well, rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed to the point, and I think you might enjoy this, that when I first later started doing journalism, arts journalism, I was working for Playbill, and I interviewed some actor. I was asking them a question, and I was like, "Well, when you're rehearsing, how long do you have? Do you like 2 months when you're doing this Broadway show?" And everybody in the room started laughing at me at the idea that these equity Broadway actors would have 2 whole months of rehearsal
Right.
when they're
It's
in.
well,
Yeah.
right. So it's interesting when I'm directing a professional show, I'll take as long as the producers will allow me for rehearsal. But they're paying people, they're paying actors during rehearsals, so you don't have the luxury of that. If I'm directing in a community theater where people aren't getting paid or are just getting a stipend, um, I will take I'll take 2 months because I like to. I just from an artistic perspective, I like to let actors just really kind of marinate in their roles. I like to, if I have the time, to spend a couple of weeks with a very loose rehearsal structure, um, where actors can just start to kind of feel the rhythm of their characters, where the blocking can develop organically based on what the actors are doing. But yeah, if people are getting paid, you get 3.5 weeks on a straight play, maybe 6 weeks on a musical. Um, but and it's understandable. I mean, it's just the economics of the situation. But I don't think it's the most conducive toward creating great art.
Here's one more memory that I'll share with you from since you're going. Sadly, you don't remember the moment by moments of "Come Blow Your Horn" the way I do, or my genius when I was up there. But
No, I do remember your genius. You were great.
thank you, Red. No, and we had great people in there. We had Robert Ostrovsky was the dad. We had the Breyer
Right.
sisters, I think, as the girls.
The girls, yeah. Kenny, what was Ken's last name? Played the
Oh God,
younger brother.
he was great. What was his name? Kenny.
I can see his face. I can't remember his last name now.
Yeah, but I do remember that we were so well rehearsed. We had Swiss watch timing up until the moment when you have to be ready for this kind of thing. And we're up there, and there's a doorbell supposed to ring. And we have this cool sound crew backstage doing their thing, not Foley artists, but making the noises. And suddenly the doorbell doesn't ring, and it doesn't ring, and every single one of us is up there ready for the next line, but the
Hmm.
next line can't happen until someone comes in. And
Right.
then I think Robert had the presence of mind to thumb for a little bit and improv until finally someone slammed on the door. Oh, look! And then I remember we all came off because we're so actors are so self-centered and so whatever, and we started yelling at the sound guy and he said it broke.
Yeah.
I was pushing the buzzer. It broke. And, it wasn't his fault at all. And we felt so bad. But
Yeah.
we felt up there without a net. Anyway, I'm telling all the stories here. What? So that was senior year of high school. Literally, last thing I did in high school was Come Blow Your Horn. Last thing you did. And then you reminded me just before we went on the air that you got into NYU. What were you going to study there?
I was an acting major there, and I've continued. Well, I said started to say I've continued acting. I actually took a long hiatus. I attended NYU for 3 semesters as an acting major. Did some directing there as well. Uh, I dropped out and moved to Chicago, where I did theater for several years. Uh, I became I founded a company there and became artistic director of the company, which in hindsight I think was a mistake. I was in my 20s, and while I had an artistic vision, I was completely over my head with the administrative end of things, and it just really burned me out. So I left, decided to take a little hiatus from the theater. I went back and got a degree in philosophy. Um,
Oh,
and
oh, oh, so good. So something that will get you a real job. What did you do with a degree in philosophy, Randy?
well, I went to law school.
Oh, oh, okay. Yeah.
Um, and I had always planned to go back to theater because it's all I ever wanted to do, but life happens. I decided when I finished my philosophy degree, I decided that I really didn't like being broke all the time, so I decided to pursue something with a steadier paycheck. So I went to law school. I got busy starting my career, got married, had kids, and next thing decades had passed. When my son, who's the younger of my two children, started college a couple of years ago, I decided to get back into it. Um, I auditioned for a community theater production of Wait Until Dark. Had no idea what I had left in the tank, and really didn't know much about the theater scene here in Houston, where I live. Um, and so I got cast in that. It was actually a very, very good production with some terrific actors. And I started to become more immersed in the local theater scene, realized there's a really vibrant theater scene here in Houston. And so in the couple of years since then, I've been doing a mix of professional and community theater as both actor and director. Last year, when I was kind of getting my name out there, I acted almost exclusively. Now, as people have gotten to know me, directing opportunities are starting to come up, and it's been great. I've been going nonstop now for a year and a half, and
How long
keep
have you
telling my
been? When did you actually move to Texas, and why did
we
you
moved to
choose
Texas
Texas?
in 2002
Oh yeah.
um,
Oh. Mm.
for a job. I had been in private practice as a lawyer when my daughter was born, I wanted to get out of that just because the hours are so demanding. It's not really compatible with being an involved parent. So I found a public sector job here in Texas and moved here. And I've been my job description has changed a bit, but I've been in essentially the same job since.
You're
Um,
still in law. You are still you're a full
I'm
time.
still practicing law. I'm getting starting to think about retirement, but my son has 2 years of college left and is thinking about medical school, so it might be a little while.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
um, but yeah, so I've been in Texas for since 2002, 23 years. That's hard to believe. And if you had asked me 24 years ago to name places I would never live, Texas would have been near the top of the list. Um,
Or certainly
but
used. I mean,
Houston is
Austin.
actually a really cool city.
Oh,
If you can
cool.
tolerate the universally terrible weather and the fact that it's just so really sprawling and there's not very good mass transit, so you have to drive everywhere. But it's an incredibly diverse city. There's a great arts scene here. Not just theater. I mean, there's great music. In fact, I read recently that Houston is the only city with professional companies that have resident companies in um, opera, symphony, theater, and ballet. The Alley Theater in Houston, this is actually really sad, but the Alley Theater in Houston is now the only remaining regional theater in the United States with a resident acting company.
Mm.
Um,
Times
but
change. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But so there's just a lot going on here. It's really a great city.
So let me ask you, when you dipped your toes back in the water, in getting back into the theater thing,
Mhm.
into what was the first you did wait until dark, and then what came after that? Like,
And I did a production of Cymbeline, a rarely done Shakespeare play. I guess scholars kind of categorize it as a romance, which is sort of a catch-all category for things that don't neatly fit into comedy, tragedy, or history. And it's a weird play. It's very late Shakespeare, and he pulls in a lot of devices from his other plays. It's a very strange play. But so I did that. Then I did a play by Donald Margulies called Time Stands Still, which was he's just a wonderful writer. I was in New York a couple of weeks ago and I saw his most recent play called Lunar Eclipse at Second Stage. It's terrific. Um, and Then I did back-to-back productions of Hamlet. I played Polonius in one and Claudius in the other. Very different
doesn't it
productions,
suck
but
that you're at the age that we're both at the age? We never got to play. I don't know if you ever got to play Hamlet. I never got to play Hamlet
I
or
didn't. I didn't.
Laertes or no. But now we're at Polonius age.
Well, I'd like to think I'm still a little young for Polonius, but I grew my beard grows in very gray, so I grew my beard in, and um, I yeah, it was that was a wonderful production, a really great cast, and it was a pretty big budget production. The production values were just amazing.
Hmm.
And then the other one I did, the other Hamlet I did was in the park, and we actually did it in two suburbs of Houston, so it had to be very portable. So the production was much more minimalist. And I really don't quite get the appeal of Shakespeare in the Park in Southeast Texas. It was a modern dress version, so I'm playing Claudius in a suit and tie, and it's 90 degrees with about 150% humidity out there, and
And Ophelia's, she's in the ship. She's just swatting
right,
mosquitoes the whole time.
right,
It's like, yeah.
yeah,
There's oil gushers going up behind her. But of
right.
all the theater experiences that you've had, besides, of course, Come Blow Your Horn, what has been the most profound and amazing one for you so far? Not that there won't be more.
How to Stand Still was an amazing experience. It was one of those rare situations where you have great material to work with. And I mean, Margley's really, he won the Pulitzer in 2000 for his play Dinner with Friends, but he's just a great writer. So you have this great dialogue, these deep, nuanced characters to work with. It was a four-character play, and it was one of those rare situations where the four of us just all really clicked on stage and got along really well off stage. I mean, all three of my castmates from that show are still friends. The woman who played my girlfriend in that one, it was my character was a uh, 55 years old, and he shows up in the first act with his 25-year-old girlfriend. Um, and But she's become one of my closest friends. She's now actually working as my assistant director on Private Lives, but I directed her earlier this year in a production of Antigone. She was magnificent. She has this vulnerability that she just brings to her roles, and she played Antigone as this kind of woman child. She could go back and forth between this very steely, determined, tragic heroine and this frightened adolescent. And she was beautiful. It was just a beautiful performance. Um, but
No, actually,
yeah,
you did mention, might as well say, Private Lives, the Noel Coward play. Is that, he said knowingly, happening anytime soon?
that is opening on June 20th at it's being produced by the Players Theater Company and will be presented at the Owen Theater in Conroe, Texas, which is just north of Houston.
Mhm.
Um, and Yeah, so we're deep into rehearsals for that. I've got a terrific cast, and I think that's going to be it's one of the wittiest plays ever written in the English language, and I think it's going to be a very entertaining evening in the theater.
Now, are you? It seems like you're not one of those directors who has to put like this special spin, Randy Packer stamp on things. You seem to be more of a director who would be like, here's a great play. Let the words speak for themselves. Let the playwright have it. Where are you on that line of showing your hand as a director or just standing back?
I I think that when you're doing naturalistic plays, the best direction is invisible. Um, the director's job, as I see it, is to kind of serve as a unifying force. You have theater is unlike cinema, which is much more of a director's medium. Theater, I think, is very much a collaborative art form. So I like to give my actors a lot of space to create. I just want to make sure that their performances and the production elements, the set, the lighting, the costumes are all working toward the same end. Um, I think it's maybe because my background is as an actor. I What I tend to like about plays are the characters, and I want things to be character driven. So I do take a fairly light touch as the director. There are times when I think a heavier concept may be called for. If I was directing Shakespeare, Shakespeare is so really malleable now, because his plays are all 400 years old. They still Many of them still speak to us, but I don't have a problem with modernizing, because there's a terrific production of Twelfth Night a couple of weeks ago that was set in the 1970s and really emphasized the sort of the queer, romantic and sexual aspects of the play, and it was terrific. It was just a really good production. Um, but directorial concepts can be very heavy-handed too. I think that you need to respect the text and remember that you are directing someone else's play. Yes, it's your production, but it's not your play. You need to respect what the author did.
Now, you had mentioned before we got on the air that sometime I think in August you'll be directing your first musical, and what
Right.
else could it possibly be but
Fiddler on the Roof. Yes.
Fiddler on the Roof?
Um,
Are you afraid? Not afraid, but are you daunted by tackling a musical with not just actors but an orchestra, score, and all of that?
I'm not, because I have an excellent musical director and an excellent choreographer. So I'm trusting them to handle that. And I know how to work with actors. I'll be doing some of the musical staging. The choreographer will be doing the large dance numbers, but there are a lot of smaller musical numbers in that don't really call for dance. So I'll be staging those. Um, but No, I'm not intimidated by it. I'm developing a pretty clear concept for the production, which again it's going to be fairly straightforward. I have an idea for the one thing that's always bothered me about Fiddler on the Roof. I think it's an almost perfect musical. I love the show. The one
Was
thing
it
that's
too?
bothered me
Is it too Jewish? I'm always worried about that. Is it?
just a little, just a little. No, actually, one of the things I love about it is that it really is universal. It's set. Yes, obviously the main characters are Jewish, but I think the themes are universal. I think everybody can relate to this concept of cultural traditions and the conflict that might arise between modernity and custom. Um,
So
between
what's yeah? So what irks or what have you
Oh,
found
so
lacking?
the thing that's always bothered me just as a director is the beginning of the show where Tevye comes out, breaks the fourth wall, addresses the audience, um, because inevitably, it takes Tevye out of the scene. He becomes kind of the master of ceremonies, um,
Hmm.
and I think that it actually puts even though it's entertaining, I think it puts emotional distance between the stage and the audience because it invites the audience to just sit back and watch instead of engaging. Um, so I have an idea. I don't want to give away too much, but I have an idea for changing the beginning of the play, not the substance of it, but
Yeah.
the presentation of it. That I think will keep Tevye in the scene, and then uh, at the end of the play, I'm going to come back to that opening device that I think is going to add another layer of meaning and complexity to the play. Um,
Does he ever break? Because I know he talks to God at various points and he
right.
debates with himself. But is that the only time I'm trying to remember that he breaks the fourth wall? Is only in
Yeah,
the
I
opening
believe
number?
so. I believe
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
Um, I started out thinking this through as a way to address that because that's always bothered me. And then it occurred to me that the device that I'm developing to address that is something that I can bring back at the end of the show, and I think it won't change the ending per se, but I think that we can add uh, some additional meaning to it.
Yeah, I mean, they did, I think, a somewhat unnecessary thing a few years ago when Danny Burston was doing Fiddler on Broadway, and they had
Mhm.
a framing device where he's a modern person and he opens up a book and he puts on Tevye's cloak. And I didn't understand. It didn't hurt the show, but I also didn't really get sort of to say, oh, okay, it's modern times, but it's like just like 100 and something years ago. I
Right.
don't know. I assume you have something else in mind. I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can talk a little bit about it. My idea is that instead of the lights coming up on the fiddler on the roof and Tevye addressing the audience, lights are going to come up on the abandoned Jewish section of Anatevka about 15 years after the end of the play. And Tevye and a teenager will enter from the back of the house. Because of the licensing agreement, I can't add any additional dialogue. So the the audience won't hear anything, but the two of them, through their acting, will establish that it's Tevye and his grandchild who will try to drop some Easter eggs, to suggest that the child is maybe that's the wrong metaphor for the show, but um, um,
Yeah, Passover eggs. Yeah,
yeah,
Passover
we'll,
bait
we'll
sim.
hide the afikomen, and that the teenager who's with him is the baby who was in Seidel's arms at the end of the
Of
play.
course.
Um,
Wow. Seidel, don't
so
forget the baby. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they come up to the stage. Tevye's looking around. They come to Tevye's old house, and he walks in. Uh, the fiddler then appears on the roof and starts to play his theme. And this draws Tevye back out, and he looks up and he gives his first line: "A fiddler on the roof." He realizes this sounds just batshit insane to his grandson, so he turns around and delivers the rest of the monologue to the grandson. And then when he gets to
Mm.
tradition, there's a change in the lighting. Maybe he takes off his coat or something, and the memories flood in, and the past becomes present. And then as I was thinking that through, I was like, all right, so how do you kind of close the circle at the end? Um,
Maybe
so
just leave, everybody leaves the stage and you have the stage empty for about 30 seconds. I mean, it will kill the applause, but it would be
well,
a moment.
sorry,
Yeah.
my dog just started barking. It's sorry. Um, well, I think what I'm going to do at the end is, you've got the exodus where everyone's leaving Anatevka. So typically you have the villagers, moving around the stage in a circle and gradually peeling off. So at some point while that's going on, we'll have the grandchild come back to the same spot where he was sitting in
Mm.
in tradition. And when Tevye and his family are the only ones left, the fiddler also appears. He plays his theme, which draws Tevye back. So Tevye comes back, looks at the fiddler like he always does, gestures for him to jump on his cart, and then he turns back. Then we'll do a lighting change again and bring it back to where it was at the beginning before tradition started. And he sees the grandson again. So now we're sort of in this twilight zone between past and present. And the grandson runs and hugs his grandfather, and the two of them walk to the cart together. And instead of Tevye just picking up the cart and walking off with the fiddler riding on the back, Tevye and his grandson now pick up the cart and walk it off, signifying that these traditions are passed on. Because I'm Jewish, I'm completely non-religious. But one of the things that I love about doing a Seder or lighting Hanukkah candles with my kids is this almost mystical experience of participating in a ritual that, my five times great grandparents did 300 years ago and
Yep.
half a world away.
Yeah.
And you're connecting with your ancestors in Russia, from Texas. And so I love the idea of giving this sense of these traditions um, moving on from one generation to the next, and binding them together, even if they're in a different part of the world, even if their lives are completely different, that there's still this connection.
Wow. I almost wish Rabbi Sal Solomon were doing this interview instead of me. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's very Jewish and sometimes comes on my show. We're talking, by the way, the Randy Packer. Make sure you do go see Private Lives at the Players Theater. Is it in Houston or Conroe? Where's
It's in
the
Conroe, which is about 30 miles north of downtown Houston.
and it's running from
June
mid-June
20th to July 6th.
to get your tickets, everybody. Have a couple more questions, though, for Randy Packer, my old alumnus from both high school and, as he reminded me, for a brief period, college. What are your memories? Were you born on Long Island? Did you grow up in Hewlett?
Yes, I was born, well, in a hospital in Far Rockaway, but my parents moved into their house in Hewlett in the 50s, and they lived there into the 90s. So I lived in the same house growing up, from birth until I left for college.
So, what are your memories? I mean, everybody makes fun of Long Island, and it's the place you get away from, but it's nicely close to New York. I mean, positive, negative. What are your overall nostalgia, if you will, for Hewlett, Long Island?
It's funny. When I was 18, I couldn't wait to get out of there. And I don't know that I would want to live there again necessarily because I really like cities. I'm not even crazy about the suburb where I live now. Nothing against it. It was a great place to raise kids. But I think if I was planning to retire here in the Houston area, we'd probably move into the city. Um, but um, but when I go back to visit now, it's really nice. It's a lot nicer than I remember. Um, it was a good place to grow up. It was safe. We we had a lot of freedom as kids. It was also a different era. I think parents are more paranoid now.
Right.
Um, but it was the kind of place where you could, when you were a kid, on a weekend or a summer day, you could go out after breakfast, and your mom would just say, be home in time for dinner, and you wouldn't see them all day, they wouldn't see you all day, and you just be out playing with your friends. And that was nice. That's the kind of thing that just doesn't seem to happen anymore. Everything for kids is so structured now, and with 24-hour cable news, frantically reporting on every child who goes missing. It creates the impression that the world is an incredibly dangerous place, even though statistically it's safer now than it was when we were growing up. Um, so it was a
And
nice
the
place to
kids
grow
aren't
up.
even going out. They don't want to go out. The
That's
parents say,
right.
"I'll see you in 8 hours," and the kid's still in the room going like swipe,
Yeah,
swipe, swipe, type, type, type.
yeah, yeah.
But what do you have memories of specifically Hewlett High School, or
Yeah,
were you at the
I
junior
do.
high? Were you in junior high South also?
No, I went to junior high north.
You went north. Okay.
I lived in the neighborhood kind of behind junior high north. Not directly behind, but we were off of Mill Road. So I was, it was like a 10, 15 minute walk from my house to junior high north. But yeah, I my memories of high school, I was not the most motivated student. I attended classes when I had to.
Hmm.
Um, I loved theater. I didn't love anything else about high school. Now I went to college and I did really well academically, but I was a mediocre student in high school just because I wasn't interested.
Can
But
I ask
theater was
why?
great.
Why then, if you went to NYU for acting and you were a big theater, like,
Mhm.
why did you leave after a year and a half? Why don't you just stick out the degree?
Um, because I was young and impatient and probably a little arrogant. Looking back on it, yes, I wish I had been a little more humble and realized that I had a lot to learn. Um, but I wouldn't say that I have regrets because you never know how your life would have turned out differently. Had I stayed that path, I might never have met my wife, who is waving from off camera here. Um,
Hello, wife. What's her name?
Her name is Wendy, and Dave is waving to you.
Hello,
Um,
Wendy, wife. How you doing? So, how did you meet Wendy, wife?
we met when I was in law school at NYU, and she was in grad school at Columbia. Um, and we were both in the city. It was my third year of law school and her first year of grad school. And we met, and then I left New York to clerk for a federal judge in Michigan for 2 years. So we had a long distance relationship for a couple of years. And then we're back in the same place and got married. And we've been married now for 28 and a half years. Almost 20, close to 29, I'll be 29 in October. Um, so it's one of those things. If I had stayed the course, maybe I would have had a better career in the theater, although maybe not. I mean, I've worked with a lot of very, very talented people over the years, and I can probably count on one hand the number of them who are still in the business, just
Hmm.
because it's such a tough way to make a living. Um,
Have you ever worked
but
with
yeah,
anyone Have you directed or acted with anyone that we would all know, perhaps?
probably not. I think probably the most successful person I ever directed was Jordan Lage, who is
Oh,
Jordan was one of the
Atlantic Theater
found
Company guy.
Yeah, Jordan was one of the founding members of Atlantic Theater. I directed him in a production of Incident at Vichy by Arthur Miller. He was wonderful. Actually, Rob Ostrovsky was in that as well. Um, and Jordan was great. And, he's done a lot with Atlantic. He's been on Broadway in I know he was in a production of Our Town on Broadway 15, 20 years ago. And it's probably been there other times. And I've seen him from time to time on TV shows. Um, so he's probably the most successful person. I don't know how famous he is.
The
Um,
New York theater, New York circles, people wouldn't know his name. Famous, not really. But you mentioned Rob Ostrovsky. How often are you in touch? Well, I mean, I see him on Facebook, but
yeah,
how?
that's it. I
Oh
haven't been
yeah,
in touch with Rob since I left NYU.
right.
Um, and you mentioned Facebook. It's funny. I really didn't, other than Macy Levin, our drama teacher in high school, um, who is a good friend. I haven't really stayed in touch with anyone from high school until Facebook, popped up 20, 25 years ago. Then I just became Facebook friends with a lot of people. And, even people who I wasn't all that friendly with in high school, it seems like everyone has turned out to be a pretty nice person.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of nice to, even if it's just exchanging birthday wishes every year, it's just nice to,
Exactly. I mean, I'm not friends with my old bullies, but pretty much everyone else, I'm perfectly. The girls who rejected me, it's fine. It's
right.
fine. I'm glad you're married. I probably dodged a bullet with you because I've got a wonderful wife, so it's all good.
Right.
Still staying
Exactly.
in touch. What, your daddy,
Hmm.
if you at your age, or back then, when I knew you, when back in high school, could give your kids, and I mean, what advice do you give your kids? It's a stupid way of phrasing that question, but, how do you raise kids in this world?
Um, I've tried to give my kids a lot of room to be themselves and to pursue their own interests. Uh, you know, I I've leaned on them to try to always put in their best effort, whether in school or anything else. But I never said you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, although my son now is planning on going to medical school. But Maybe that's in spite of me, but he's like, Dad, you're such a hippy dippy freak. I'm just gonna, no, I'm not really, but
No,
I'm,
yeah, no, you're not granola
I'm
crunchy.
gonna, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna be boring and go to medical school. No, no, he's a great kid, and I have a lot of fun with him. We have actually have very similar tastes in music, and we like a lot of the same things. Um, but I've just, I've really just tried to say, pursue, find out what you love to do, pursue it. But if it's not something that you can support yourself doing, then be realistic. Um, excuse me.
You are Jewish. It's a not jump wholeheartedly and go with your heart. Life will take care of you. No, it's like yes, have your dreams, but be realistic.
Well, I mean, you do. You have to. I learned
Yeah,
from
yeah.
my own experience. I got tired of living in roach-infested apartments. When it was all I could afford as a struggling actor in Chicago. Um, and I don't want. There's nothing wrong with going through that for a few years when you're young, but nobody wants to spend their lives living like that. Um, and as it turns out, my kids really, they like music, they like theater, but they've never pursued it seriously. My daughter just got her master's in psychology, and she's hoping to pursue a PhD. She's taken a little time off to work and do other things, but she's hoping to get into a PhD program. My son, as I mentioned, is thinking about medical school. Um, but my son is also a baseball player, and he he's pretty good. I mean, but he's not going to play in the major leagues. But that was something that he's really wanted to pursue through college, despite some injuries that have sidetracked him. He had shoulder surgery when he was in high school, and it's something that I've encouraged him to pursue because it's what he loves to do. And I want him to play at the highest level that he can because I don't want him to spend the rest of his life wondering what would have happened if he had pursued it.
Right.
I don't have any regrets or any major regrets anyway about the way I've lived my life. I gave it a shot in my 20s. When I walked away, it was because I chose to walk away. It wasn't because my parents said, "We're not sending you to college for theater. Go be an accountant."
That's probably
I
what my
pursued
parents should have said. We're not sending you to
it.
college for that. Being an accountant, you want to do theater, do it on your own time. I'd be in a lot better shape, let me tell you. By the way, we've been talking with Randy Packer here. Everybody, if you're in Texas or near Texas or can helicopter into Texas, remember that from June 20th through, what was it,
July
July
6th.
July 6th, Players Theater out in Conroe, Texas. They are doing Noel Coward's Private Lives, directed by this man, for whom I have one last question. In a couple of years, he'll be empty nesting and so forth and might move to the city part of Houston. But do you have a bucket list thing, like something that you really think you will do in the next 10, 20 years?
I don't know about a bucket list, but my wife and I enjoy traveling, and so we'll probably do some of that. Um, um, I hope to continue pursuing theater. It's funny. I think I'm a better actor now than I was when I was in my 20s, not only because of the life experience, but because well, I'm just as passionate about it. It's not as integral a part of my sense of my own identity, if that makes sense. So it makes it easier to, or maybe easier isn't the right word, but more possible to just take risks with my acting. Because if I do something, if I make a bold choice and it falls flat, um, that's too bad, but it doesn't chip away at my sense of myself the way it would have 40 years ago. Um, so I've really enjoyed acting. I think I've done some of my best work in the last year and a half. So I hope to continue pursuing that and directing. It's just been wonderful having these creative opportunities over the last couple of years. It's something that I guess I had really kept bottled up for a long time, and now I'm probably to some extent making up for lost time. Probably should take a break. I've been going nonstop for a year and a half, but um, things keep popping
Take a
up.
2 week break, and then you'll get a script, and then you'll get an opportunity. Something, the phone will ring, and you'll be
Yeah,
like,
that's exactly
"Yes,
it.
yes, have to do this."
Right. As Warren Zevon said, right, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Um,
There you go. Well, we love you alive and awake. Randy Packer, so good to catch up with you after all these decades. Please do not be a stranger. Please cast me in something because I'm still brilliant.
well,
And
come to Texas.
yeah, or come to Maryland, say hi. But mazel tov to your kids, mazel tov to your wonderful Wendy wife, and to you, much, much success acting and directing and in all your endeavors. Great to see you, Randy
Good to
Packer.
see you too, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks so much, man. Bye bye.